we're hiring for potential rather than hiring for necessarily the skills. And in doing so, I think we've got a 93% conversion rate. So effectively what we do is we go out and we look for individuals that have all of the right mindset, and we put them through our Train to Fit program, and we train them, and they could, like I say, 93% conversion into Babcock as permanent members of our workforce.
Welcome to the Work Intelligence Lab podcast. We're back with episode 7 of the 2026 series. Today I have Leanne Cann from Babcock with us, Group People Services Director. Leanne, it's lovely to welcome you back, and I'd love you just to give a little bit of intro in terms of what you do at Babcock, and great to see you again.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So yeah, Leanne Cann, Group People Services Director. I work for the HR function, so part of the people function, and my remit covers quite a wide range actually across the people function. So starting with kind of talent acquisition, all the way through to sort of SWP, data analytics, people administration, so shared services. So predominantly focusing on everything within the people function that's delivering a service to our business. And yeah, that's me.
And with that, looking at some of the data that we have, I know that the medium aerospace and defense organization is losing up to $330 million a year because, or due to, the lack of skills, not being able to get them fast enough. Leanne, when you hear that number, what does that mean to you inside Babcock?
I think from a Babcock's perspective, we absolutely resonate with what you just quoted there. I think Babcock is similar to many organisations in the fact of specifically talent, the war for talent, the lack of skills and the shortages is something that we, like many others, have faced and are continuing to face, which is resulting in us kind of really looking at everything in which sort of we do, how we do it, with regards to sort of attracting the skills that we need, because, you know, for years we've kind of gone down the traditional, you recruit experienced hires. We've always had focus on graduates and apprentices, but that's not gonna solve the problem anymore. So we're really having to flip it on its head and think really differently now on how we do this moving forward.
And that is something I was going to bring up is basically you cannot hire your way out of this crisis. And the way I see it, you've kind of bucketed the approach that you've had, which is like you've created a talent ecosystem, if I can put it that way, right? If you were to look at that in buckets and you were to explain that to other organizations, whether it be in defense and aerospace or otherwise, I think many are facing similar challenges, not just in your sector. How would you explain to them what it is, the moment when it became clear that hiring isn't going to get you out of this, and what steps you took to approach it in that kind of bucketed way that became an ecosystem for you?
We've had a number of, I guess, things that I can talk about, which was what led us to this. So we've had a number of challenging contracts over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, and I think one in particular was one where resourcing was a real issue on this contract, and it's the real first time, I think, where we really couldn't recruit our way out of it, certainly not from within the UK. Obviously we're a global company, but I'm talking on our operations in the UK. And we realised that we had a real shortage of welders up in Rosyth on one of our contracts. And there were just no welders. We'd gone down every avenue that we could have, which resulted in us going out to the Philippines and bringing across 250 welders on a 3-year skilled visa to plug the gap that we had on that particular contract. And I guess the good news story of that is that we pivoted in our approach and we filled the gap, and we've brought the contract back on track with regards to the resourcing. But it was the real eye-opener, I think, for us in terms of we've got to do things differently, which, as you said, has just kind of led us to this look at talent and skills. And as such, we've introduced a number of different programs to try and help bridge that gap. So as I previously said, we've always had graduates and apprentices, but I guess if I bring it to life, 2 years ago we were recruiting 350 graduates and apprentices. This year we're recruiting 850. So the increase is massive. But I think more than that is that we've just recently gone through sort of a rebranding in this space, where we always called it early careers. It's now we've rebranded to emerging talent, and the reason for that is, whilst graduates and apprentices are absolutely key, that's not it's not our only answer. And so as a result, a lot of our focus now is on how do we upskill, how do we attract, how do we look at returners, how do we look at mid-career changers, because the skills aren't out there. I think in the UK alone, approximately up to 50,000 shortage in the engineering sort of technology market. So we need different ways to sort of fill that gap, and that's what we've been doing. That's the different options that and avenues that we've been going down, other than just our graduates and apprentices, which, like I say, there's still a lot of emphasis on that. We've broadened our program from level 2 all the way up to level 6. Even this year alone, we've introduced 12 new different apprenticeship programs.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we've got the pre-apprenticeship programs, where in some of the communities that we're operating in, we're working with the local schools to offer pre-apprenticeship programs. So that will be typically for those that may not meet the grades, and working with them to sort of, I guess, strengthen their confidence, but their aspirations as well, but also from an academic perspective, is giving them the support and encouragement that they need, and then they are converting that into our modern apprenticeship. So I guess it's down to that diversifying, and with the pre-apprenticeships as well, we've just introduced a new sort of game based assessment. So again, it's neurodiverse, so that we can make sure that we do diversify. We can go into different untapped people as well, so that everybody's getting the opportunity. So that we started in sort of the going back to what I would say is the traditional graduates and apprentices, but broadening it much more and seeing how we can diversify and how we can bring in more. And then it's kind of okay, what do we need to do? What does upskilling look like for us in Babcock, and where have we really got the shortages, and where can we pivot? And I think I use the word pivot a lot, in terms of we have to keep pivoting to kind of see where's our problems, where can we see issues, and we're putting a lot of emphasis on our strategic workforce planning, so that we've got that up front. We're looking at like the next 5 years out now, because I think that's been something that notoriously Babcock hasn't been particularly great at. And actually, by putting more focus on that, it's giving us a much longer runway to say, okay, what do we need to do? What's the areas where we're going to have the shortages?
Is there anything that you have identified to date that you think these are some, either the quick wins, low hanging fruit areas that maybe surprised you didn't think of before?
I don't know if it necessarily, I would say, sort of low hanging fruit. I think what's probably surprised us, so we've introduced our train to fit programs. So we've obviously in partnership with the ManpowerGroup. So we brought in train to fit, and with that we focus on sort of some key areas, so like project planners, data analytics, those types of programs. And what that's doing is we're almost we're hiring for potential rather than hiring for necessarily the skills. And in doing so, I think we've got a 93% conversion rate. So effectively what we do is we go out and we look for individuals that have all of the right mindset, and we put them through our train to fit program, and we train them, and they could, like say, 93% conversion into Babcock as permanent members of our workforce. But I think what's not necessarily been surprising, but what's been eye-opening, and I guess it's opening more and more doors, is the transferable skills. So that's the bit I think is, you would have heard me talk previously about.
This is one of my favourite stories about you can tell us about one of your hairdressers.
Yeah,
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken.
that's it. So we've got a number of different professions that are on now on our Train to Fit, and we talk about like hairdressers in terms of they are like the ultimate project manager in what they do in their day-to-day lives as hairdressers, and actually recruiting and putting them through Train to Fit in the project planners is those transferable skills have just, those are the things that I think we hadn't always thought about, and that's the aim with the Train to Fit, is to hire for potential, upskill, and also offer people who may have thought kind of doing a career change at different parts of their, in their life wasn't possible because they haven't got the qualifications or they haven't got the skills. So it's opening more doors. And we're currently looking at doing specific programs for veterans, and also, in Babcock, we are, we've got a real drive to attract more females into Babcock. So again, looking at what can we do in the Train to Fit space that might help, and look at different industries, different professions. We have a lot that are people who may have taken a career break to break up families or caring responsibilities, and it's targeting different markets and untapped talent to come in and help Babcock with our skills and our talent.
And is this giving you a faster time to productivity for your traditional pathways that you would have taken?
Yeah, in some cases, absolutely. So obviously our normal pathways would have either been recruit with the necessary skills, qualifications, or we go down the graduates and apprentices, and they obviously do the graduate and apprentice programs. But yeah, the Train to Fit programs are allowing us to get through and do a fast track. So, we've got the Train to Fit, we've got other similar programs up in Scotland where it's we're looking for we've gone for unskilled, and we then put them through semi-skilled. So production support operatives is a really, 250 that we've brought in there, which again is something that previously we wouldn't have done.
When we spoke before, you were quite passionate about communities and building communities. Yes. And you've got, from our discussions, very hard to find locations in terms of finding that talent. You've had quite a remarkable view of what you've done locally in those communities to develop talent, and not only that, but boost the local economy. Just tell me a little bit about that story and how you approached it, and bring it to life a little bit, because I think it's something that could be, learned again, applied across sectors, across industries.
Yeah, so also we operate out of a lot of lots of communities, but I guess the focus of this conversation is around Plymouth and Scotland. So we've got big dockyards in those places. We need to attract thousands to these areas, but also kind of support the local community in terms of actually what does Babcock kind of offer, and how can Babcock support the growth of our local communities. So Babcock is part of a number of initiatives in those communities. I guess, only this week in Plymouth, Babcock signed an agreement with our Plymouth University to partner with them with regards to the courses that they offer, where we'll co-create modules on some of their qualifications so that it's a clear pathway for people to go into employment, but also to attract people to Plymouth University. We're doing similar things in Scotland. We have signed Team Plymouth. We've got Team Scotland, where again Babcock is one of a number of strategic partners in terms of all of us having a real interest in how can we improve the local communities, how can we boost the economy that we operate out on, but how can we also provide more opportunities to those that live in those communities, and equally, how do we attract more to those? So we've got lots that we do. We do a lot of in those communities. We do 7,000 hours a year STEM activities in our local community.
Brilliant.
So I think last year we interacted with 81,000 pupils. And again, it's kind of trying to sort of support the local schools where STEM's concerned. In the hope that it's opening more doors for our young people, and ultimately, we would like to attract them to Babcock to be our talent of the future.
I mean, we've spoken again a little bit about this, and I know that generally, I think there's a perception from more youth or the kind of younger demographics around this industry maybe not being, cutting edge or whatever it may be. How are you changing that perception? And you mentioned a rebrand, or kind of how is that landing? What do you think is working to appeal to that generation?
I think, I cannot underestimate like what we're doing with the STEM, with the STEM activities in terms of, I guess, myth busting and particularly, across all of the all diversity, I guess, not just from gender, but in everything in terms of how can we promote what we do as a defence organisation and the importance of it, so that when people are leaving school and they're thinking about their career choices, how can we make it's something that is a consideration, which previously, hasn't been. And certainly, I think us going out into the schools, partnering with our local universities to promote what Babcock does. And we do offer as well, we offer really structured work experiences. So, we do numerous events across all of our communities to kind of promote what we do. And maybe I think a lot of it's around myth busting in terms of, but what the career opportunities are. It's there's endless opportunity.
Speaking about, so on the one hand, you've got the lack of skills and, you're going out there to kind of attract as much new talent, diverse talent, myth busting that you possibly have. But I know that you also have, applications coming in at scale, and speed really matters. And it takes us to the topic of kind of the big theme of 2025 and 2026 around sort of AI and what we're doing around AI, not going away clearly. So I suppose you've got a role where you've got to make sure that you can do things at scale and at speed. But where have you got to draw a hard line which says this still needs human judgment, even if technology can go faster? Because I think you've got a strong ethical compass, when I speak to you about these projects that you embark on.
Mm. Yeah, so obviously she said AI is a hot topic, and I would say in this, where what we're talking about today, I think Babcock's very early on that journey, and it is a fine line. It's a fine line in terms of where do we think we use it, and I think our focus and our energy at the moment is, to your point, is how can we speed up the process, and how can AI help us in that, but not use AI necessarily to do the assessments, to do that human interaction, whether that's in person or whether that's virtually. I think what we're looking at is how can we use AI to screen. As you said, we don't have a problem in attracting candidates through our application. So how can we use AI faster to either screen the applications, and also, I guess, using AI to maybe speed up the early process up to when we get to interviews or assessments or whatever that may be. But you raised actually a point, because one of the things that we have introduced this year, particularly with our graduates, is around, again, we get thousands of applications, and we go through a process where we do lots of assessments, But sometimes we don't necessarily like pull out the fact of where that you've got somebody that's got that real desire to want to come and work for Babcock. And that doesn't always necessarily come through when you've got CVs or they're doing online assessments and you're doing like big assessment centres. Those types of things aren't always something that you can easily sort of assess. And actually, that's really critical for us, is that having people come and work for us that wants to work for us, that's invested, passionate about what we do. So we've just introduced in our process that there's sort of 3 questions that we ask them, and it's sort of assessing their reasoning for wanting to come and work for Babcock. And that's this is the first year, so obviously we'll see kind of we're in that phase at the moment. So when we recruit at the end of this year, that will be the first cohort that have gone through this new process. So that will give us a sort of benchmark to say, actually, what are we seeing? What's the difference that we're seeing in terms of those that we're bringing through? And the hope is that, again, in the future, AI might help us in terms of screening out those questions and looking for what we want. But at this moment in time, we certainly don't see a world where AI will take over that whole process, because I think that human interaction is so important.
And more and more so is kind of how I'm seeing it. Us being again in the staffing industry, recruitment industry, it's referrals. People get you a job much quicker than applying for 150 to 200 jobs via AI mediums or platforms, right? So it's just like a small, very traditional approach of networking, really, from a candidate maybe perspective view as well. But it seems that organizations equally value the human interaction.
Yeah, certainly from a Babcock perspective, we do. Obviously, AI is evolving, on a daily, hourly basis, but our focus is definitely more on the initial screening rather than the actual full process. And we have got the challenges because we need security clearance, so our time to hire is it's not a quick process, because naturally we need security clearance. So anything that we can do that minimizes down the time up front, that gets us to the point of selecting the candidate, will absolutely help us to where we need to be.
Yeah. I think we were talking about AI, and but that was one of the things I wanted to myth bust something that you said, which is Babcock is early on in AI. And I think the more organizations I talk to and who are starting to kind of be more transparent about the AI journey, I'm finding that are equally in the same position. So I don't think, there are obviously the kind of super users and more advanced organizations, or those organizations who are more advanced within pockets of the organization, but others aren't, right? So there's more innovation pockets happening. But I certainly don't see that the general AI landscape is everybody is even has or is realizing the ROI of their AI initiatives yet. So speaking about AI, and you were talking about it from a application process, you've also got the skills shortage that you're up against, which is not going away, right? How do you see AI helping you solve that skills shortage? It's something you thought about yet? What are you looking at?
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's one of our, so Babcock as a whole is investing in AI. So I've spoken about it from my perspective, from a talent attraction journey, but actually AI is something that Babcock is investing in, and because it absolutely will be key to the future in terms of what can it do to help with our skills shortages, and that is definitely when we're kind of looking at, from an SWP perspective, when we're looking at what are all our options in terms of how do we fill the gap. Certainly AI will be one of many of things that we look to do.
Yeah, that brings me to another question I have, which is really, we've got a massive demographical issue with an aging population. I don't think I really need to go through the numbers. I think most people are generally aware in the broader society. It's especially prevalent where you are in the kind of more legacy traditional organization, where you experience this kind of loss of knowledge as people are retiring, and or what do you do with that knowledge? How do you extract it back to your younger generation, early career? What did you say? Emerging talent um, uh, uh, candidates.
Yeah, so that's another sort of focus area. So, I talked about kind of our graduates and apprentices, but when you look at the demographics for Babcock, we have got an aging population, and an awful lot of knowledge is sat there. And we're encouraging that sort of mid-career changes, but because one of the biggest barriers is how do we get that knowledge? How do we instill that knowledge for these people? So we've been looking at different retiree programs and looking at, and we're partnering with some of our local colleges and communities, but also industry partnering together. It's an industry problem, not just a Babcock problem, and actually looking at how can we predominantly attract those that have retired with knowledge to come back, but as either mentors or coaches, or even in colleges and universities, coming back as part-time lecturers to start to kind of train through those different paths as well. So that's a real focus area for us in terms of how do we get that knowledge and how do we upskill and not lose it.
So we've got, when I'm talking about your ecosystem, that the Babcock has transferable skills, your emerging talent, your retiree program, AI and sourcing, screening, technology. And then you got the local, which I love, the kind of local investments in those kind of hard to fill areas. Is there anything I've left out, number one? But I suppose the question would be, if you were going to double down, or if we were going to give advice to somebody who was looking at this ecosystem as of today, let's say a year ago to where you are today, what would you say has probably been the most successful or the most important to focus on? Or has it been a case of you couldn't have done all the parts needed to work together? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think you couldn't. I don't think I would single down on any one particular thing. I think it is a combination of all of those things, and I think that the real change, and we can't underestimate that change to emerging talent, and actually unlocking lots of different routes to untapped talent, and I think no matter who you are, where you are, what your background is, I think what Babcock's created is so many different routes now to be accessible. And that I am passionate about, no matter who you are, being able to have opportunities. And our programs now are, like I said, you go back a few years, we'd only recruit if you had the skills, the qualifications. It was all around, graduates and apprentices. And now it is much more about, it doesn't matter what career you're currently in, where you are in your life, that there will be something for you within one of our routes of Babcock. And that's special to me, in the fact that we are giving those opportunities to everybody. And that will be people who may not have any qualifications. We've got options now where they can work with us, and we can, like our pre-apprenticeship is a major step forward in terms of how do we bridge that gap for individuals. But also, I think, generally people now have 2 to 3 careers, in their lifetime. So I guess offering these different routes for people, but we absolutely, I know I've said it, and I've probably said it multiple times on this conversation, but I think to be able to, the skills aren't there, the talent is, the skills aren't. So it's about how do we attract the talent, how do we discover untapped talent in lots of different markets, and how do we as Babcock provide those opportunities for those individuals and the communities that they operate in? How do we support them to provide them with a career, stability, aspirations, confidence, everything, and also, coming to work for a company where what we do absolutely matters more so now than ever in terms of national security and defence.
Yeah. And I love it. And like I said, we've had this conversation, and I just thought, what a great story in terms of, talent creation, I think is what you're really doing. The talent's there, but you are creating it into the skills. If you were to look ahead, and I imagine that a lot of hard conversations probably needed to be had with leadership, to kind of change this mindset, to go in a different route, to say we cannot just hire and hire again. If you were to give some advice to leadership or decision makers going forward, that they to transform what they're doing, what would that be? What would that look? What would you say that would be?
I think ultimately the data speaks for itself. There is a massive skill shortage and the skills just aren't there. So the data itself speaks for itself. If we do nothing, then, and I think from our perspective, I think we had some really close shaves where we managed to pivot, and we managed to, when I talk about going out to the Philippines and getting the 250 welders, we've been fortunate that we've been able to change our direction, and we've been able to fill that gap. But that's, that can't be a sustainable approach moving forward, and we have to build a resilient pipeline. And I think that is, we have been on a journey. We've been on a journey to get there, and there's still lots more to do. But I definitely think we've tried to approach it from trialing things rather than going all in. And I think then, if I look at the train to fit, 93% conversion rate, that speaks for itself in terms of sort of different options. So,
and when you say conversion rate, those people are retained still within the business today.
So while they're on the Train to Fit program, so 93% of them that join the Train to Fit program and complete it convert to a permanent role with career paths for Babcock. So we've had to demonstrate, using data, we've had to demonstrate different options, and it's evolving all of the time. As I've said, this year we've added 12 new programs to our apprenticeship. So I think that the bit that we've had to really focus on is around that future planning, because I think that's the bit that we've been really working with our business around, is that we won't be able to be told, next week, by the way, we need X amount of welders or whatever the case may be. We need to have that pipeline. We need to have that future view. And, our aim is around 5 years. Without that, no matter what we put in with regards to all the different programs, they all take time. They're not an overnight. So that, I think, more than anything, is critical to the success of being able to meet our skills challenge.
Well, I want to say well done, and we'll keep on following you and supporting you. And I'd love to hear about the pre-apprenticeship program perhaps when we talk again in more detail. I do know that from a global perspective, the UK or the EMEA is very much regarded as kind of leading the path in terms of apprenticeships, and there's more desire to do that globally. So it'll be a good topic to discuss next time. What we're gonna end it off on that. But I mean, if you're looking forward to one thing this year, what's kind of exciting you? What's getting that fire burning for the year ahead?
I think more of what we've just talked about now, but I guess specifically Babcock's got a big growth agenda, and with a real focus on global growth into different international markets. And I think that is something that's will be challenging but hugely exciting. I think it will provide yet further opportunities for colleagues of Babcock, but also from attracting So yeah, I think keeping on what we're doing, I guess, as you know, hopefully what it's come out through this is, you know, the passion to develop individuals and providing lots of different opportunities and continuing to work with all our local communities as well. There's lots planned for the coming year.
Yeah, and I just want to say a special thank you for sharing that with us, because I think I've heard the story before, but I think it's worthwhile sharing with the wider talent community and business leaders, and in terms of, you know, not just doing well, but doing good, right? So I'll leave it at that, and I'll wrap us up for this episode. Thank you so much, Leanne, for joining us. I hope we'll speak again.
Yep. No, thank you.
And in the meantime, best of luck with all your endeavors.
Thank
and
you.
We'll talk to you next time once you've got some more global stories to tell us. I'd love to see how you apply some of your learnings more globally.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karla.